Hi YouTube, welcome to another edition of Horror Hounds, and for this video I'm going to be looking at some more of the best movies from the section 3 list of the video nasties. So I just did part 1, I'll link that below in case you missed it, and as a really popular video. Thank you to everyone that watched and commented and got involved, and I had a few requests to do a part 2, which I was happy to do because there was quite a few movies that I missed off that I thought were pretty good or pretty interesting movies. So this is part 2. So in case you missed it, the section 3 list of video nasties consisted of movies that were taken from the shelf, but they didn't face any further action. They weren't prosecuted and therefore didn't make it to the official video nasties list. These sort of quickly went back on the shelf after, in most cases, just a brief stint where you couldn't get hold of them. But anyway, so I'll get straight into part 2. Now, the first movie is not a movie that I'm all that keen on, actually, but I know a lot of people do like this one, so I'll give it a mention, and that's Alice, Sweet Alice. So yeah, this is another one that was taken off British shelves for a while. So this one is kind of most famous now for being Brooke Shields' first film. She's just a young girl in this, and she may or may not be involved in some murders that are taking place around this church. Yeah, I thought it was okay, but it's been a long time since I've seen it. But I know a lot of people are quite fond of this. People look at this as like a really good sort of religious slasher. So you might want to check it out. I know a lot of people are a fan of that one. Okay, next up. Again, this is not a good movie by any stretch of the imagination, but it's an interesting one, and not many people talk about it. So I thought it was quite worthwhile for a conversation about Section 3 movies. And this is Brutes and Savages. So this is a kind of like Mondo style documentary of this guy. He's on like an expedition around Africa and South America, and he's documenting and looking at these kind of just weird practices and bizarre rituals and things like that, most of which consist of torturing and killing animals for real. So it's got some really unpleasant material in this, but at the same time it's really hokey and really tackily made. One of the most laughable scenes in this is a scene where a native is supposedly attacked and killed by a crocodile, but it's obviously just a guy rolling around in a swimming pool wrestling with a plastic crocodile head. It doesn't even have a body, it's just a plastic head, and it's the most fake thing I've ever seen on the screen. It's so laughable. And out of everything that happens on this, that's the thing that I remember the most. The absolutely really silly fake alligator scene, even though it's got a lot of quite nasty real life footage and animal cruelty. So the alligator scene didn't do it any favours. But yeah, it's certainly an interesting one. Surprised this one didn't actually make it onto the video nasties list because of the real life footage, but I think it was probably too obscure. I don't even know if we got this over here, and it certainly didn't make the same sort of groundbreaking waves as Faces of Death and things like that. So so yeah, definitely not a recommendation, but it's a curious one, and one that not a lot of people talk about. Okay, next up is Graduation Day, which is such a standard slasher. Good movie, I liked it, but no idea why they kind of homed in on this one and felt the need to take it off the shelves. Again, it's been a while since I've seen this one, but I remember really enjoying it. Like I say, it is quite average. I remember it being quite middle of the road, so I don't know why they found this one so offensive. But it's definitely worth a watch if you're a slasher fan. And I mean as well, Graduation Day could have been anything. Could have been a comedy or a family drama, so it doesn't really even have a suggestive sort of horrible sounding title. But yeah, definitely worth a watch if you like your slasher movies. It's Graduation Day. And another pretty good slasher film is Happy Birthday to Me. I would imagine this image on the front is what got this one taken off the shelves here in the UK. This picture of a guy with a skewer being rammed into his face. So a kitchen skewer which can be found in the everyday home. Remember that the censors didn't like the killer using anything that people could find in their homes or gardens. So I imagine perhaps the cover of this one was enough for it to get taken off the shelves momentarily. But Happy Birthday to Me is a pretty good one. It's got some very inventive kills. So again, if you like your slasher movies, definitely one that's worth checking out. Okay, next up is in Seminoid. And again, it's been a long time since I watched this one, but I remember liking it. It's like a B-movie monster movie, so I'm bound to love anything like that. But again, interesting that they felt the need to remove this one off the shelf. I don't get them being offended by creature features. I don't know where the link comes into that kind of harming society and influencing people to commit murder and mayhem. But yeah, and Seminoid was taken off the shelves temporarily, but luckily it wasn't for very long, I don't think, and it found its way back onto the shelves. It's pretty cool if you like really silly monster movies with like rubber suit monsters and things like that. Okay, next up is Mark of the Devil, which this one is a pretty heavy going film. This one has some quite nasty moments in it. This is follows the sort of 18th century witch finder and witch hunting, witch trials and things like that. So you've got Herbert Lom is like the judge, the magistrate who sort of passes the law to do all this. And then you've got Reginalda, who is beyond creepy as the actual witch finder who commits a lot of atrocities against these young women who he gets into his head that they are carrying out witchcraft. But yeah, there's some really nasty scenes of torture in this one. Pretty hard to watch. And I believe as well, a lot of the implements and instruments that they used on the young women were actual real life torture devices that were used back in the 18th century, which is really creepy to know that. But it's a really good film, despite its nasty nature. I do really like Mark of the Devil. I think it's a really effective film. It looks pretty good for the time it was made, and it does deliver on the shocks and things like that. So yeah, if you are looking for something with a bit more bite, Mark of the Devil is certainly one that I would recommend. So yeah, that's a good one. This one, I should have put this one on part one, to be honest, of the best films, and that is Night of the Living Dead. So yeah, crazily, the authorities did get hold of George Romero's classic, and it was off the shelves for a little bit. I imagine this one probably got roped in with all the other sort of zombie flesh eaters and things like that. They probably didn't even realise it was a sort of black and white movie, which even then was considered sort of, you know, a classic horror film. So I doubt that this one spent very long off the shelf. But you all know Night of the Living Dead, really classic movie. But yeah, that did find its way off the shelf for a little bit. Next up is Nightmare City, Umberto Lenz's frantic zombie film. This is a really cool film. It's not the best made film, but it's very entertaining. It's this outbreak of zombies in this city, and they're fast zombies as well, which is quite unusual. I think this was like 1980. So fast zombies that can, I think they can shoot guns and things like that. It wasn't really done at the time, but it's pretty cool. Very entertaining, very silly. But I do enjoy this one. It's got some cool kills in it. The zombie creatures look they don't look great, but they look cool. and it's got a pretty good ending. A lot of people don't like the ending. They think it's a bit of a cop-out ending. I thought it was really good, and it's quite different, and it thinks outside the box a little bit as far as these movies go. So yeah, if you want a fast-paced, entertaining B movie, definitely check out Nightmare City. Next one is another movie that I am not a fan of, but this is a very, very popular film, so I thought I'd better include it for part 2, and that is Phantasm. So I've tried numerous times to watch Phantasm, and I just can't get into it. I don't enjoy it. It's very weird. I find it very weird and hard to get into. So it's just not a film that I'm a fan of. I know a lot of people are. But yeah, this one is another one that found itself off the shelves temporarily. Again, difficult to know why they found this one that offensive. I imagine it must have been the spheres, the balls that hit people in the face. But when you watch it now, it's so cartoonish to see the blood flying out and things. But yeah, I imagine that had to be it, because otherwise, Phantasm, it's quite a, I don't know, it's quite a sort of, it's got a lot of magic and weirdness to it. It's not sort of a grueling horror film, I would say. So I don't know why they found this one so offensive, other than the orbs. So that's what probably did it. But yeah, Phantasm did find itself off the shelves for a while. Next up is another slasher film. They really didn't like the slasher films here in the UK, and that is Prom Night, which is a film I like, but again, it's very middle of the road. Very standard stuff. Not really much idea why they would have felt the need to get rid of this one. I know there's an axe on the cover here, so whether it was just seeing an implement like that and thinking it's going to be another one of those films where they get the old tools out and chop people up. But no, I find Prom Night very standard. Great to see Leslie Nielsen in this one as the high school principal. But yeah, it's overall an average slasher. I don't have much else to say about Prom Night. Certainly not video nasty worthy, I would say. Okay, next up is Scanners. So I imagine this had to be the exploding head scene. I talked about that recently in another video. But yeah, I would imagine somebody saw Scanners, got to the exploding head scene, which is not too far into the film, and thought, oh my goodness, we have to remove that. So yeah, it must have been that which got this one taken off the shelves for a while. But yeah, it made its way back. I really don't associate Scanners with video nasties at all. I always forget this one's even on section 3, but yes, it was. But yeah, this one it's a film that seems just way above the kind of trashiness of video nasties. And I'm not a huge fan of Scanners, but it has a pretty good concept to it, and it's a very good story. A little bit convoluted for me, but yeah, certainly not a video nasty in my opinion. But the exploding head scene is awesome. I can see why that did shock people. Next up is a very popular one. We have Extro. This one was mentioned a few times in the comments of part 1. A lot of people thinking I should have put Extra on. I probably should, to be fair, but I couldn't get them all on, so definitely wanted to mention this for part 2. So I really like Extra on the whole. I prefer the first half of the film. I really like the idea of the alien sort of just skulking around the English countryside. It's got that really cool birthing scene. The second half gets very, very weird, with all the things flying around and the little people running around. I did not expect the film to go there. It's very bizarre. I think the guy that directed it, is it Hugh Bromley Davenport? I think he did say much later he was high like every day he was filming this, which certainly makes sense when you see the second half of the film. But yeah, I much prefer the sort of the rural alien side rather than when it gets sort of really sort of Twilight Zone weird in the second half. But great movie. I really like Extro. So yeah, definitely wanted to include that for part 2 of this video. And it's also one of the ones that I think a lot of people think it is a video nasty. It never quite got there, but yeah, section 3. And the last one is Zombie Lake, which I have a strange relationship with Zombie Lake, in that it's an abysmal film. It is a really bad film, yet I sort of love it at the same time. So it's a hard one to sort of talk about its positives, but it's actually, in a strange way, it's a really beautiful film. For a trashy Section 3 zombie film, it looks amazing. Set in the French countryside, around this lake area, and it looks beautiful. The cinematography is surprisingly good for this kind of movie, and it just has a really pleasant ambience about it. It's hard to explain. Other than that, it's a very, very weird film. I have no idea what's going on for most of it. It takes the stance that it was more the French that were villains and the Nazis were sort of victimised. It sort of explores that a little bit, which is weird. The zombie makeup is awful. It's a very sleepy film, but I don't know. It just does something for me, which makes me like it for some reason. Jess Franco was originally billed to direct this one, but he pulled out because there wasn't enough money involved. So I can only imagine how little funds this had behind it if someone like Jess Franco felt he didn't have enough money in it. But Gene Rowland did it instead. So yeah, very hard one to recommend because it is awful. But yeah, it has something about it which I find quite charming. So yeah, that was part 2. That was a few more films that I just thought I'd mention that I thought were good films or interesting movies that found themselves on Section 3. So let me know what you think of this list, and again, let me know which ones you like. It'd be really interesting to hear that. So thank you very much for watching, and stay tuned for more videos.